He said, ask them what our uncles in America have sent for us now that we have at last contacted our uncles. And the answer was that the uncles did not send anything. And Salman Greenberg said, you mean you don't have any money for us? And they said, no, we have no money for you. And he said, you mean you have no food for us? And they said, no, we have no food for you. And he said, you mean they didn't send us any clothing, our uncles in America? And they said, no, they did not send anything. We are here just to establish contact with you. And he said, well, what's the use of contact if you didn't bring anything, if you have nothing to say to us, and you have nothing to give us? So it was very difficult for them to understand that at first they wanted merely to know where they are and what was going on and to see how the help could come to them. And I'm sure after that meeting, all of this was facilitated. But the meeting itself still stands out to my mind as very bizarre. And here I was between two sets of people who had no more communication after the meeting than they had before the meeting, except to know that they were there, that there were a good number of them waiting to be helped out of America. Of course, help came later on. Question 12, were you involved in Aliyah Bet? If yes, please be specific. How would you characterize your role in this work? There were a good number of places where I went to talk to DPs, people who came to different places in different ways. Very difficult for me to recall how they got there. Whether they were in a bunker and asked me to come down and talk to them when they found out what I was doing, whether it was in a building that was hastily set up as a kind of displaced persons center. It was difficult to say whether these displaced persons centers were set up by the displaced persons themselves, by coercion, or whether it was done by government or by anyone authorized or not. There they were. And I had been briefed by some of the Palestine Brigade people who told me that I was an official member of Haganah. At that time I didn't even understand what that meant. And that I am delegated to get in contact with these people wherever I can find them and ask them whether they want to go to Israel or whether they want to go elsewhere, and see to it that the ones who want to go to Israel are sent down to the south through Munich and the Brenner Pass into camps in Italy that had already been set up by the Palestine Brigade. In some instances, I recall there were some of these representatives, brigade members who were with me when I talked to them, and other instances I was called upon and talked to them myself, and later on either I or others arranged for them to travel wherever they were supposed to travel in order to move on to the next step. I recall that there was a great deal of discussion among them whether now was the time to go to Israel or Palestine, rather, whether it was going to be safe, whether there were going to be many difficulties, and whether they should go because of these difficulties and declare themselves, go to their own country where their presence will be counted, and do whatever they can to develop a state. The discussions were lively and they were fascinating. And here were people who didn't know what to do. Some were interested in finding some rest at last and some safety and some security. Others, on the other hand, felt very upset by what had happened, to the point where they were not going to forgive, where they wanted to dedicate their lives to the development of a state in Palestine. Unfortunately, I don't have the records which would give me the exact number of times that I did this and where I went, but I know it was within the area of Nuremberg, Erlangen, Fürth, and Munich. Question 13, with what other Jewish organizations were you involved during this period? Describe this involvement. The only other Jewish organization that I know of is the Palestine Brigade, and that I know only because several of these individuals came to see me, and I took their word for everything. I took their word for it. I had no evidence, real evidence, that there was anything going on in Italy except their word, and I got people into trucks, and they moved. 14. Were you ever called upon to smooth relations between DPs and the U.S. Army? Please be specific about places, dates, and people involved. The only place where I was called upon to do that was in Munich. I considered Chaplain Klausner in charge, but somehow there were problems there between the DPs and the military police. There were a lot of DPs involved in some questionable activities at that time. Naturally, there were a good number of DPs who tried to get whatever they could, and there were some pretty important officers of the military police who wanted me to talk to people on various committees of DPs to tell them that they have to get control of their people. There were some situations there in which they accused some people who were more or less official, although no one really knew who was official and who wasn't, because we were all operating under no special authority. Everyone was operating as an individual. There was no such thing as a government, because we were not operating under the auspices of the German government. We certainly are AMG or the United States Army. We just did what we wanted. It is very difficult for me to recall the details of what was said and done, but I remember bringing messages to various people in various positions in the Munich area. That is the only place where I was called upon by the military police to help smooth relations between the residents, German residents, the Army, and the DPs. Question 15. Were you involved in work within the concentration camps? What was the exact nature of your activities? Give as many examples as possible of specific dates, places, and people involved. I came too late for that. The concentration camps in that area were all emptied by then. All I did was visit them, take some pictures. I was involved in no activities whatsoever in the concentration camp.